Chapter 17 of Bill the Conqueror by P.G. Wodehouse. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Sunday night at Mario's. The spirit of optimism and joviality which has just been shown sweetening the daily round of No. 9 Marmont Mansions, Battersea, had found, during the week which had passed since Flick's arrival, no counterpart at Holly House, Wimbledon. In spite of the fact that the return of prodigals is almost proverbially associated with joyful revellings and effervescent gaiety on the part of the whole strength of the company, with the possible exception of the fatted calf, Flick had found little to cheer her in the atmosphere of her revisited home, and day by day, in every way, she had had need to fill her mind with thoughts of Bill, in order to prevent depression claiming her for its own. The lecture which her Aunt Frances had begun on the platform of Waterloo Station had continued intermittently throughout the week, and at 7 o'clock on Sunday evening it gushed up into such a freshet of eloquence that Mr. Sinclair Hammond, bursting the bonds of years, put his foot down and asserted himself with a mild man's impressive ferocity. "Flick," said Mr. Hammond, interrupting his wife's remarks in an odd, strained voice. "Yes, Uncle Sinclair?" "Just run away for a moment, will you?" Mrs. Hammond directed at him the gaze which had so often sent him cowering back among his books. But to-night it had no effect. Hell hath no fury like a mild and peace-loving man who has at last decided to give battle. And Mr. Hammond was strong with the strength of one who has been simmering for a week in a fury of suppressed animosity. Just as Bill West, another mild man, could be roused by a blow on the head with a stick, so could Sinclair Hammond be stirred to action by the spectacle of Flick, whom he loved, being talked to and talked at, and nagged and harried, and generally rendered miserable. "I am speaking to Felicia," said Mrs. Hammond frostily. "Get out, Flicky," said Mr. Hammond with a twisted half-smile, and Flick left the room. Mrs. Hammond turned majestically on her husband. Unlike the King of France, she had no one to warn her that this was no mere revolt, but a revolution, which was to destroy her supremacy in the home forever, and she endeavoured to crush him in the old familiar way. "Be quiet," said Mr. Hammond, and Mrs. Hammond was quiet. "You've got to stop it, Francie," said Mr. Hammond mildly, but holding her with a glittering eye. "You've had plenty of time to say all there was any need to say on the subject of Flick's leaving home, and now you've finished. Do you understand? Definitely and completely finished. I won't have the poor kid worried any more, and to remove temptation from your path, I am now going to take her out to dinner somewhere. I am going to transport her to where there are lights and music and good dyspepsia-promoting food. The band will play, the lights will gleam. Who knows, I may even dance with her. And when we come home, probably at about 6 in the morning, you will welcome her with your famous smile. You will dig up a motherly embrace, and your pleasant chatter will deal exclusively with the brighter side of life. Do I make myself clear?" "But, Sinclair," protested Mrs. Hammond, and there was an awe-struck note of appeal in her voice, "you can't take Felicia out to dinner. George is coming to dinner." "Your brother George," said Mr. Hammond, "is a man whom in many ways I respect and admire, but As a dinner-table companion for Flick at this particular moment he fails to qualify. He would lecture Flick, and I do not intend to have her lectured. But he will think it so odd if Felicia is not here to meet him," wailed Mrs. Hammond. Mr. Hammond kissed her affectionately on the forehead. He was very fond of Francie. "He may be able," said Mr. Hammond frivolously, "to get an article for Pike's Weekly out of it. Famous nieces who have behaved oddly to famous uncles. Well, I must be going up to dress. I suppose it means a white waistcoat." He sighed. "Ah, well, we must all make sacrifices in this world." He kissed Mrs. Hammond again and left the room, humming. "Flick," he called. Flick came out of the morning-room. "Flicky," said Mr. Hammond, "we're a couple of reckless young fellows out for a good time. How would you like to come and have dinner somewhere low and vulgar? Let's go to one of those night-clubs which are living hells, that Society Spice writes about." Flick gazed at him for a moment with an incredulous awe. Dearly as she loved her Uncle Sinclair, she had always recognized his limitations. And this was open rebellion. This was hoisting the skull and crossbones. "Wouldn't it be lovely?" she said wistfully. "It will be lovely," Mr. Hammond corrected. "But Uncle George is coming to dinner," Flick reminded him. "I know. Think how jolly it will be to revel in some gay café, and feel that Uncle George is sitting snugly all the while in yonder dining-room. It'll be like turning on the cold shower and standing over by the bathroom door, watching it." Flick hugged him. "You're a darling, Uncle Sinclair." "Well, I got a kind of idea that a little change would do you no harm to-night. Where shall we go? Do you know a good hell?" "Let's go to Mario's." "Mario's, a new name to me, considering that I am one of the wild and depraved younger generation they are always writing about nowadays. I know very little of London's West End. Will it be devilish enough for me? I want a place where I can throw bread at people. How is the bread throwing at Mario's?" "Splendid. All the best shots go there. Mario's was the place where young Lord Trevelyan picked off 6 waiters with 6 consecutive rolls." "6?" said Mr. Hammond musingly. "Ah, well, we must see what we can do. But how do you come to know of this low resort?" "I went there once," Flick hesitated, "with somebody." "Oh? Ah," said Mr. Hammond. He scrutinized her a little closely, and his manner took on a certain gravity. "Who took you to Mario's, Flicky?" "Bill West, Mr. Paradine's nephew. You remember my telling you about him in the garden that day?" "I remember. So he is over in this country, and you have met him again?" "Yes." "Flicky," said Mr. Hammond, "I know you will think me an awful old bore, but I'm afraid I shall have to begin dinner by talking what you might call shop. You won't mind?" "I don't mind anything you do, Uncle Sinclair." "Right," said Mr. Hammond cheerfully. "I ought to get finished by about the fish course, and after that we'll start throwing bread. Were these waiters that Lord Trevelyan bagged sitting or on the wing?" "Rocketing." "Indeed?" said Mr. Hammond. "Well, well. We can only do our best. Hurry up and get some clothes on, Flicky. I'm off to dig my white waistcoat out of the mothballs." "Flag that waiter, old love," said Miss Prudence Stryker, indicating a sprinting martyr who was whizzing about among the crowded tables in his efforts to do the work of 2 ordinary men, "and remind him that when he was a little boy he promised to bring us a bottle of Lanson." Bill beamed politely and turned to do her behest. "Waiter!" "Louder!" recommended Miss Stryker. "Less of the Pekingese and a bit more of the bloodhound." "Waiter!"
"That's better. You've got a nice voice. If you studied and had it developed, you'd make a good train announcer."
Bill beamed again. It seemed to him that he had been beaming through a dreadful eternity. If it is true that a man may smile and be a villain, it is equally the case that he may beam, and yet be in an extremely acute state of discomfort. Bill was not enjoying his evening out at Mario's celebrated night-club. Even in the remote days when he had been wont to add his presence to those parties in New York of which Judson Coker had been the life and soul, Bill had never really derived much pleasure from this type of entertainment. Indeed, even before his mistaken infatuation for Alice Coker had turned his thoughts to deeper things, he had come quite definitely to the conclusion that parties bored him to extinction. To be at home at these bohemian revels, a man has to have a nimble wit. He must be a strong kidder, a good scout, and a great old josher, and must possess, in addition, an interior of cast steel and asbestos. Bill was deficient in all these qualities. His interior put up practically no resistance after the second or third cocktail, and no one was more keenly alive than he to the fact that he was a poor josher, an indifferent scout, and hardly to be reckoned a kidder at all by an impartial critic. The present occasion was proving even more exacting than those other orgies. Then he had been one of a crowd, while now he was in the position of having to shoulder the whole weight of the entertainment himself, and it had proved a considerable weight. Apart from the fact that the holy associations of the place made it distasteful for him to dine there with anybody but Flick, there was a flamboyant exuberance about Miss Prudence Stryker which had oppressed him from the very moment when she had sailed forward to meet him in the lobby. The accuracy of Judson's description of her had come home to him right from the start. Judson had said that she was built on the lines of a motor truck. She was. Judson had said that she would be wearing a red dress. She was, though the adjective was almost feeble. Judson had said that she was full of pep. This also was true. The only point on which Judson had gone astray was in his prediction that Bill would like Miss Stryker. He did not. He would have been hard put to it to name any other living person whom he disliked more. He disliked her large and gleaming eyes. He disliked her impressive physique. He disliked the tendency which she had developed as early as the soup course to address him as "Old Love." And most of all he disliked the way she bent forward and laughed merrily in his face, and her habit of pointing her witticisms by slapping him on the arm. As Mr. Wilfrid Slingsby had discovered at an earlier date, Prudence Stryker was a girl of muscle, and her slaps were like the kicks of a playful horse. Nevertheless, he persevered. Miss Stryker, whatever her surface faults, had one outstanding merit that eclipsed them all. She was the girl who knew where Mr. Slingsby had buried the body, and as such must be conciliated. So Bill, though speculating wanly as to what she would be like if the waiter ever brought that Lanson, brought the old bulldog courage of the West to bear, and set himself grimly to see the thing through. The exact nature of the body which Mr. Slingsby had buried refused to reveal itself. All through the age-long meal Miss Stryker stoutly declined to talk what she described as business, confining herself to snappy anecdote and mirthful jest. All that Bill had gleaned by the time the coffee arrived was that Mr. Slingsby's secret was a pippin well worth waiting for. And in the interval of waiting he managed to achieve such a creditable imitation of a vivacious host that Miss Stryker formally stamped him with the seal of her approval as a good kid. and as everybody knows, it is but a step from being a good kid to being a good scout, and from there a mere amble to the giddy eminence of a great old josher. Shortly after Bill had reached the good scout stage, Miss Stryker expressed a desire to dance. Bill rose politely. The idea of dancing with his fair guest was one that filled him with loathing, but in pursuance of his policy of conciliation he forced himself to do it. It was at the moment when they were circling round the room for the second time that Flick entered the restaurant with her Uncle Sinclair, and mounted the stairs that led to the balcony. As a vague concession to old-fashioned propriety, Mr. Hammond had decided on a table in the balcony, in preference to one on the main floor. The main floor, a glance told him, was infested to no little extent by brilliant creatures, who, while doubtless good-hearted and kind to their mothers, seemed to him better seen at a distance. The balcony, to which are banished those who visit Mario's without dressing, had the appearance of being 99% pure. His white waistcoat would be wasted there, but that could not be helped. How long Bill danced he could not have said. The process seemed interminable. From time to time the music would stop, and they would return for a brief instant to their table, only to spring up once more at the bidding of the saxophones. Eventually, however, just as he was beginning to feel that Miss Stryker's powerful form must be constructed of india-rubber, she confessed to a desire for temporary repose. They sat down, and Bill, feeling that if he missed this opportunity another would not occur until he was too weary to understand what she said, leaned forward. "I wish you would tell me about Slingsby," he pleaded.
"Want to know about that?"
said Miss Stryker amiably. "I do, indeed."
"Well, then, listen, kid," said Miss Stryker. "Here it comes."
Bill hitched his chair a few inches nearer and beamed devotedly into her face. Miss Stryker, with a preliminary slap at his throbbing arm, began to speak. Mr. Hammond tugged at his waistcoat, which had grown mysteriously tight since its last public appearance, and looked down interestedly over the rail at the throng below. "Nothing in this modern life of ours, Flicky," he said, "is more significant than the attitude of the good and respectable towards Sunday evening. Places like this are the outward and visible signs of the inward and spiritual change that has taken place in the life of the English family. 20 years ago a man of my decent stodginess and unblemished reputation would never have dreamed of moving out of his home on Sunday night. 20 years ago I would have spent the concluding hours of the Sabbath surrounded by my loved ones beneath my own roof-tree. There would have been supper, consisting of rather red cold beef, rather wet salad, cold clammy apple pie, blancmange, and a very big, very yellow cheese. This would have been followed by hymns in the drawing-room, or possibly, if our views were a little lax, by some round game played with pencils and pieces of paper. The fact that I am here, and strongly tempted to drop a sardine on the head of that bald gentleman down below, is due to what they call the march of progress." Mr. Hammond helped himself to hors d'oeuvres. "Having relieved myself of which prosy reflections," he said, "I will now turn the conversation to the subject of your previous visit to this place. How did you happen to come here?"
"Bill brought me. He had been here once before with Mr. Slingsby, Mr. Paradine's manager in London."
"And now about William," said Mr. Hammond. "Tell me all." Flick's kitten eyes searched his face gravely. She was wondering what would be the result if she really did tell him all, if she confided in him the twin facts that she loved Bill
and that Bill loved her, and the additional fact that, as soon as ever he gave the word, she proposed to elope with him. Consideration for her Uncle Sinclair's feelings caused her to decide against this course. It would have been comforting to herself to pour out her secret, and she knew that she could have relied on him to keep it, but it would be at the expense of his peace of mind. Poor darling, how he would worry! "I happened to meet Bill the day I left home," she said, "and so, you see, when I was by myself in London, I naturally saw quite a lot of him." "I see," said Mr. Hammond doubtfully. "I used to dine with him a good deal." "I see." "And one of the times he brought me here." Mr. Hammond crumbled his bread. "I seem to recollect your telling me in the garden that day that this William had been the ideal of your girlish dreams. Did he still exercise a spell when you met him again?" "He's very nice," said Flick guardedly. "You didn't tell him, I suppose, that you had once worshipped the ground he trod on?" "Bill was in love with somebody else when I met him again in London." Mr. Hammond looked relieved. "Ah," he said. "Madly and desperately," said Flick, bubbling. "He had 12 photographs of her in his sitting-room." Mr. Hammond's relief was now complete. He attacked his roast chicken with gusto. "I'm bound to admit, Flicky," he said, "that you've taken a weight off my mind. You may have suspected occasionally during the past few years that I am mildly fond of you. I am a battered old hulk, but with little to live for." "I thought you said you were one of the younger generation." "Never mind. For purposes of my big speech, I am a battered old hulk, with but little to live for, except the happiness of my golden-haired child." "I wish I had been your child," said Flick wistfully. "How simple everything would have been then, wouldn't it?" "If you mean that you would have twisted me round your finger even more easily than you do at present, you are probably right. I've been a good deal worried about you, my Flicky. I want to see you doing the right thing, and I've come to the conclusion that your marrying young Roderick will be the right thing. The mere fact that he will eventually inherit several £1,000,000 gives him a great glamour in my eyes." "I never knew you were so sordid. If I loved a man, I wouldn't mind how poor he was." "Brave words, child. But never forget, poverty is the banana skin on the doorstep of romance. What are you gazing at so intensely? You have a spellbound look." Flick had been watching the gyrating couples on the floor below. She withdrew her gaze with a start as he spoke, and turned to him once more. Had Mr. Hammond been an observant man, he would have noticed that her eyes had widened into a curiously fixed stare, and that about the corners of her mouth there was an oddly pinched look. But he was not an observant man. Moreover, he was smoking now, and the cigar, which he had purchased in a somewhat doubting spirit, was proving of such rare excellence that his mood had become dreamy and introspective. "I was looking at those people down there dancing," said Flick. She seemed to speak with difficulty. "Weird creatures," said Mr. Hammond, puffing comfortably. Flick scrawled hieroglyphics on the tablecloth with nervous digs of her coffee-spoon. "Uncle Sinclair," she said at last, "I suppose men are always falling in love with girls." "It has been known to occur," admitted Mr. Hammond. "I mean thinking they are in love with girls, and really not being in love with any particular girl, but I don't know how to put it. I mean there is a sort of man who might pretend he was in love with a girl, and and really seem to mean it, and make her think he meant it, while all the while he was perfectly happy with other girls, and forgot all about her after they had been separated for a day or two.
I should imagine a great many young men were like that, unless they have changed a lot since my day. Constancy is a shy plant that blossoms only in the sunshine of middle age. Except, of course," added Mr. Hammond hastily, "in the case of a young fellow like Roderick. You wouldn't find him doing that sort of thing."
"I wasn't thinking of Roderick," said Flick. She traced another intricate pattern on the tablecloth, the little muscles working about her mouth. "I suppose you're right, Uncle Sinclair."
"In what respect?"
"I mean about being sensible. I suppose, well, what you'd call romance is rather silly, isn't it? And the only thing to do is to be sensible."
"That is my opinion, given for what it is worth. Though, mind you, I don't think that you would have any cause to complain of lack of romance where Roderick was concerned. The boy drips with it. Look at that tie he wears."
"If you were a girl, Uncle Sinclair, would you marry a man if you found out you couldn't trust him?"
"What do you mean?"
"Well, suppose someone had pretended that he was in love with you, and then you suddenly found out that all the time he was going about with other girls, dining with them, and dancing, and—" Flick shot a swift glance over the balcony rail, "and beaming up into their beastly faces as if he thought them the most wonderful thing in the world," she went on viciously. "Wouldn't that make you feel you had made a mistake?"
Mr. Hammond patted her hand paternally. "Don't you worry, Flicky," he said. "Roderick isn't that sort of chap. Not that sort of chap at all. If he was, I would be the first to advise you to have nothing whatever to do with him. A fellow you can't trust isn't any good to anybody." Chapter 17